Hello, quilt artisans. My name is Shonda, and welcome to my channel, Under the Needle. So, my quilt is abandoning me. I'm being abandoned by my quilt. Let me explain. Okay, so 2023, passion projects only, right? I had a tough year. The end of 22 was kind of rough. My beginning of 2023 has been kind of rough. So I've decided passion projects only for 2023. I get to work on whatever I want. The only rule is I must finish it, right? So if I want to start all these passion projects, when I have like 20 whips over there, I have to finish them, right? So passion project number 1, Nightingale. Now I actually cut this project out last year in May. 2022 in May, I cut out this quilt, and I know that because I was scrolling through my phone and I found a little bowl with scraps in it from that quilt. And I remember after cutting it out that the scraps looked so cute that I wanted a picture of the scraps. So I took a picture of the scraps. So I know that it was May. Now I didn't get to sew it. I didn't start sewing it until January. And I just put the binding on yesterday. Now, I finished quilting it probably about a month ago, maybe more. I feel like I finished all the piecing in January, and then I did the quilting. I got the quilting done, and then I feel like it sat for a month before I actually put the binding on. I did a whole nother quilt. So after I pieced this quilt, I did a whole nother quilt top before I put the binding on. But the binding's on. So, a little bit about this quilt. There are a couple pattern designers of whom I have made multiple designs. One being Missouri Star, but I don't really count that because it's not one person that makes all those patterns, right? It's a team of people that make those patterns. So even though I've made a couple, I don't really consider that, I don't know. I just don't. Like Fat Quarter Shop, I feel like I've done a couple of those, but I don't really consider that a single designer. So of what I've made, I know I've made, for Monique, I made one of hers, and I have another one that's a whip. For Gudrun Erlo was probably the most prolific. Because I don't like complex. I don't like a lot of pieces. I don't like a lot of small pieces. And Gudrun's projects allow for a complex look with simple piecing. And that really appeals to me. So I believe of all quilt pattern designers, I have done the most of hers. Too many to even remember, honestly. Too many to remember. So now this pattern designer, this is Brittany Lloyd of Lo and Behold Stitchery. I have done 2 quilts now of hers, and I'm now working on quilt number 3, and I have a pattern number 4. I like her work, to say the least. So when I saw this I'm not sure if this is the first pattern of hers I've seen or not. I'm not sure. But I feel like it was. I feel like this pattern was my introduction to Brittany Lloyd. Not sure how she came up on my radar. No idea. But I'm glad she did. It was kind of cool to find out that we live in the same state. She actually used to live not too far from me until she quit her job during the pandemic. And then I believe last year she and her husband moved to the North Carolina mountains and opened a studio. So her, passion is now her full-time job, which is kind of cool. So this pattern here was, she said that it was special to her. She said she named it after Florence Nightingale, who was, of course, known for being the founder of modern nursing, and she thought that this was a way that she could honor healthcare workers because she herself was a nurse. And so this pattern was an homage to her profession. I just thought it was super cool. I had no idea what fabric I was going to use. I had no idea. I did like the way that the pattern goes together. I'm not, well, the structure of how she writes her patterns. I like that we get, the coloring sheets for the multiple sizes. I like that she does these cool mock-ups, which a lot of people don't do, where you can see the quilt in other fabrics. I think that's pretty awesome. That's not something that I see commonly in other pattern designers. You see it sometimes on their blog. Sometimes on their blog. You might see one or two. But here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different mock-ups here, which is pretty outstanding, I think. Okay, so anywho, now this pattern kind of was easy. This is definitely a beginner friendly pattern, 1000%, because all you are making are half square triangles, flying geese, and then you're doing some other little piecing, straight piecing. You're going to put these components together. We're going to make these components, and then you put them together like a 9-patch. Really easy, but it's a great look. So I'm going to show my quilt because I'm so proud of it. I love it so much. Okay. So this is my quilt. Try to get it all in here. Try to show the rest. And I'm going to show you the back, and I'm going to have a whole video about the back of this quilt. This is my back. Okay. So that's my quilt. So to give some tips about the quilt construction. Okay. Let's get the whole block in here. Now, I don't know if you can see, but this is just a 9-patch. So we have 4 half square triangles. Brittany used the 2 at a time method where you take 2 squares and, sew them together. Yeah, where you take 2 squares and, oh, my alarm is going off. That's not good. I don't know where my phone is. So when you take two squares and draw a diagonal line corner to corner and sew a 1/4 inch on either side of that line, cut it apart, you have 2 half square triangles. Since there's 4, I went ahead and did the 4 at a time method. So I adjusted my cutting instructions for that. I adjusted my cutting instructions to make sure that I could do that. I don't think I needed any extra fabric. I believe I was still able to use the same amount of fabric. I just modified the cutting instructions a little bit. Also, for the flying geese, Brittany used the 4 at a time no waste method of making flying geese. I prefer waste. I am an inaccurate sewer, so it's easier for me to make something bigger and trim it down so that it's the right size. So that's what I did here. I used the Eleanor Burns 4 at a time method. It does have waste. So that's how I made my flying geese. Once you have those components made, you're basically just going to sew the flying geese units to this rectangle, and then you're going to piece this center unit as well. And then once you have that done, then you just put it together like a 9-patch. So not bad. I did my binding a little different. I normally sew my binding on from the front, and then I wrap it around, and then I stitch in the ditch from the front and capture it on the back. I did not do that this time because when you do that method, you are attaching the binding from the back, and then I couldn't see, I wouldn't be able to see, this seam would already be determined for me. Like, so the reason I did it is because you can see I've lost all my points. I lost all my points here on this star figure. Okay, and so in order to try to help accommodate for that, I used a 2¼ inch a 2¼ inch binding, but then I also kind of cheated my seam allowance a little bit when I attached my binding to make it so I wouldn't lose as much point as I could have. I did lose quite a bit, but it could have been worse. Now, I knew this going in. I could have made the choice to add a narrow 2-inch border around my quilt so that I would not lose those points. I made the choice not to do that. That's okay. One of the reasons why I chose not to do that is because had I done that, I would have had a lot of difficulty putting together this pieced back because I barely had enough to make it work. Barely had enough fabric to make it work. And so adding another 2 inches around the edges would have made it impossible. Now, I did not put a label on it, but this is going to another home. So when I say my quilt is abandoning me, this is what I mean is this. This is supposed to be my quilt. I made this. This is supposed to be for me. I saw this pattern. I fell in love with it. I saw this fabric collection. I fell in love with it. This fabric collection came in one of our Stashin' with Stephanie subscription boxes. Bookish by Sharon Holland for Art Gallery Fabrics. And I liked it so much that I bought extra. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that this was the quilt that I was going to make with it, and it was going to be mine. Well, what happened was I started putting it together, and then it told me that it needed to go to someone else. And it needs to go to my Aunt Sandra. My Aunt Sandra is my mother's sister. First of all, she's a nurse. And when I started quilting this quilt and looking at how the colors came together, it just immensely reminded me of her. I just was filled with the spirit of her. I thought about her. Every time I look at this quilt, I think about her. And so to me, that's the quilt telling me that this is supposed to be her quilt and not mine, which is upsetting. I did not put a label on it, so I might go back and hand sew on a label. But yeah, so I'm going to try to see if I'm going to either hand sew a label or either just write. I have some markers, some quilt markers. I might just be lazy and just write a message, like write my name on the binding. That's an option as well. And the year, my name and the year on the binding. That might be all that happens here. I'm not sure. I don't know. But I love how this quilt came out. I love this pattern designer. I can't really say enough about it. It's just the colors are so pretty. I love the fabric. It's just, I don't know. It's just my favorite thing right now. And it's giving me joy. And as much as I would love to keep it, we must do what the quilt gods say. We don't have to listen to the quilt police, but we do have to listen to the quilt gods. And the quilt gods are saying that I have to pay this one forward. So that is it for me. And I will see you guys next video.